Abby Johnson has been a fierce advocate for women. That's why she took a job with Planned Parenthood. It's also why she rose through the ranks to become a clinic director. But when she assisted in an actual abortion, it's no exaggeration to say that it literally turned her world upside down. Abby joins us today to talk about her personal story, her thoughts on pro-life issues, and how to raise pro-life children. Stay with us. Welcome to the Moms for America podcast. Each week, we introduce you to special guests who share their personal stories and advice on how to build a strong foundation of faith, family, and freedom in their home, community, and country. Hi, moms. I'm Debbie Carolitis, your host of the Moms for America podcast. Welcome. This is a show encouraging, inspiring, and educating moms in their journey through motherhood. We want to go ahead right here at the top of the show to invite you to like and subscribe, share our podcast with all your mama friends in your mama group. Also, if you have any information that you would like to share with us, ideas, topics, would you please email me at podcast@momsforamerica.net. Again, you can email me at podcast@momsforamerica.net. I also want to invite all of our mamas listening, everybody out there, to join our movement here at Moms for America. It's moms like us all across the country uniting together to fight for our faith, family, freedom, and the Constitution. So go ahead, please check us out at momsforamerica.us. All of our information is there. We would love to have you join us, join our family, I should say. So on to today's program. Several years ago, Abby Johnson wrote the book Unplanned, the dramatic, and I mean dramatic, true story of a former Planned Parenthood leader's eye-opening journey across the lifeline. That book was turned into the movie Unplanned in 2019. The book and the movie tell the remarkable story of Abby's life, her commitment to helping women secure abortions, and why her point of view changed dramatically on abortion. This is going to be a great show, and I am thrilled to have her joining us today. Welcome, Abby. Thank you for joining us on the Moms for America podcast. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I have met you in person a couple of times. I've heard you speak. I've watched your movie. I've listened to your podcast. I'm a great fan. Warriors like you, mamas like you that are sharing their story, sharing their voice, inspires all of us, right? It educates us, it encourages us. You're just doing a great job. So thank you for everything you're doing. I know it hasn't been easy. This is a difficult story for you to share, but God is using you in a mighty way.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm honored to do it. God has blessed me with the ability to do something that I love and to do something that has a purpose. And so I'm just grateful every day to be able to, do something that really matters. And
this is really
nothing
mattering.
better than that.
Yeah, this is really mattering. Would you mind just telling the moms that are listening to us a little bit about your family? I mean, you have quite a little tribe over there. You're busy, mama.
I do. Yeah. I have eight kiddos and 8 kids. They are 15, 10, 9, 8, 7, 5, 5, and 3. So we have a very busy house and very, very noisy, very fun, and we love it. And we've just been very, very blessed. We have one adopted child. Our 7-year-old is adopted, and a set of twins, and just life is crazy, but it's fun.
Just as a side note, did you always want a large family?
I didn't actually. I'm an only child, so I didn't grow up with siblings, didn't grow up, in big families or anything. But when I left the clinic, when I left Planned Parenthood, I was actually at church one day, and I felt I heard God almost audibly say to me, "You will have 8 children." And
I love that.
I was like,
no, you were like, no, let me think about this for a moment.
I don't think so. But it was just almost this audible voice of the Lord. And that's happened to me at maybe like three or four times in my life. And, He said,
So I
you
guess you're not surprised when you look back because
yeah. And he was like,
the
you
Lord
have 8
told you.
children. And every time, I'd have a baby and I would think, even when I had the twins and that was, 6 and 7 and people were like, okay,
Yeah.
you're
Enough.
finally done. Right. And there was just this feeling inside of me, like, I'm not done.
Wow.
And right after I had Fulton, our 8th child, I just had this sense of peace come over me, like, okay, now you're done.
Nice.
And I thought, okay, Lord, like you were right, 8 kids, that was it,
Oh,
and
what
so
a great story. And this is such a powerful story once we actually hear a little bit about your life. I mean, this is not the life that you thought you were going to have. You were on a completely different trajectory for your life. I know it's going to be hard. We only have a half hour here to discuss, but a little bit about your story. You were raised in a faith-based home that was pro-life, from what I understand. And through your journey, you end up working for Planned Parenthood and end up being quite the rock star there as far as their standards. How did you end up at Planned Parenthood? How did this happen? How did your career take you there, I should say?
yeah, I mean, I did grow up in a Christian conservative home. I've got two of I believe, the greatest parents on the planet. But I didn't grow up in a home that necessarily talked about abortion. I think my parents just believed, we've taught Abby the biblical pathway to marriage, and that's abstinence. And so as long as she follows that path, then abortion will never be on the table. So we just don't need to talk about something so uncomfortable with our daughter.
Okay.
My parents were not activists in the pro-life movement. They didn't go, march at pro-life rallies, or, we didn't volunteer at pregnancy centers. I didn't even know what a pregnancy center was. So we just really didn't discuss it at all. It wasn't talked about in my church. Like even today, it's not talked about in most churches.
Right. This is where we're failing, but
Yeah,
right.
our pulpits are silent, and they were silent back then too. And it was a different time in our country. Abortion was not talked about in the media like it is today.
Right.
Women were not standing up at podiums and, shouting their abortion. Anything involving sexuality was considered more taboo. And so nobody was wearing a shirt that says, I've had an abortion. Women were not proud of the
Right.
fact that they had
Right.
killed their children.
It was a different
So it
culture,
was
right?
just
Different
it was a
time.
different time. Culture was different. So I went to college very uneducated about the topic of abortion, honestly, very uneducated about sex and sexuality. And so I, got into a relationship with a guy that was 8 years older than me. That progressed very quickly. It progressed physically very quickly. And I did not have I had a very close relationship with my mom, but I did not have the relationship with my mom where I could go to her and say, Mom, things are happening in this relationship and I'm not really sure what's going on here. And
You were kind
I
of
need
on
to
your
talk
own.
to you about it,
Right.
or,
Right.
and so I just, things continued to progress, and I actually had my first unplanned pregnancy, and I did not contact my parents. I did not have a conversation with them. My boyfriend said, let's go have an abortion. There was no discussion about adoption, no discussion about parenting. And I said, okay,
Right. This is
and
what people do, probably,
yeah,
right?
I
Unplanned.
was in a state of crisis, right? I was like,
Sure.
my parents can't know. My dad's a deacon in the church. My
Right.
mom's a church pianist, right? They would be
Right.
so embarrassed. They would be
Right.
so ashamed. So I'm
Right.
just going to go take care of this. And that way nobody will know and nobody will be embarrassed. And my
Right.
parents won't have any idea that I was having sex outside of marriage, and everything can just go back to the way it was. And I had my first abortion in
Wow.
2000, and shortly after I met a woman with Planned Parenthood. But by that time, abortion had already entered my life,
Sure.
and that sin had already gotten a hold of my soul.
Right.
And so I was already sort of headed down that path.
Right.
And by that time, sexual immorality had already entered my life.
So
And
at that point with that abortion, did you feel like there was a life there, or were you kind of
no,
just a lot of the population where you just kind of like it's not something I'm going to worry about. I'm just going to let it go
no, I
away.
mean, I was just thinking about me. I was
Right.
thinking about me and my
Right.
crisis. And honestly, when I had the abortion, I felt very relieved. I mean, all of
Okay.
these studies that I see where, you see 95% of women feel relieved after they have an abortion. I think, yeah, absolutely. I felt very relieved because at that time it was a very selfish decision. I
Sure.
wasn't thinking about the baby. I wasn't thinking about the fact that there was a life in my womb. I didn't know how far
Right.
along I was in my pregnancy. I was sick. I was throwing up all the time. I was embarrassed. I felt
Sure.
ashamed. And I just needed to have this crisis done. I needed to have it over with and done with. And so that's why I had the abortion. And my boyfriend told me this is going to fix all of our problems,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so we had the abortion. I was so glad I wasn't throwing up anymore. I was so glad that this
Right.
embarrassment was over with. I was so glad I wasn't pregnant anymore. I was so glad I wasn't going to have to tell my parents. I felt so relieved. I had no regret. And
Did
so when
you
I
go
see
to a
these
Planned
studies,
Parenthood? Did you go?
when I
I'm
see
sorry.
these studies, I'm like, yeah, of course. I know
Right.
exactly how these women feel. The
Right.
reality is that most women don't have any trauma or regret from their abortion set in until 15 to 20 years down the road.
Uh-huh.
That's the reality of trauma. And so I did not have my first abortion at a Planned Parenthood. I had
Okay.
it at a private clinic. I still didn't know what Planned Parenthood was when I was approached by Planned Parenthood. But when she started telling me, about safe and legal abortion and, women's rights and all of that, I thought,
Mm.
okay, well, I've already exercised my right to choose. So
Right.
I should help other women exercise their right to choose. Right. And I was already, sort of on that slippery slope. Right.
Was
I
it
tell people
about?
it's like you're in a sinking ship and you're
Right.
trying to drag everybody else in with you. And that was me. And so I was very vulnerable to their
Hmm.
talking points
Right.
because of the sin I was already sort of immersed in. And I started volunteering as a college kid, graduated. They offered me a lot of money to start working
Mm.
there, started working there. And I just started getting promoted through the ranks. I was educated, I was
Hmm.
articulate. Um,
They
you
found
know,
you to be a
I,
great spokesperson, really, for them.
yeah, and I was white.
Mm.
So, sort of the trifecta, right? So they employ a lot of low income, low education minority workers to sort of do the day-to-day grunt work
I see.
in the clinics. They promote educated, articulate white people
Right.
through the ranks.
You're right.
So that was me. So I got promoted. Eventually I was the director, but I'm not medical. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I got my degree in counseling. So I went on and got my master's degree in therapy. Um, and
How long did you work at the clinic before you had this pivotal moment? How long were you there
I
before
was there
this
for
happened?
8 years.
8 years. Okay.
Mhm.
So you're there 8 years. You're rising star. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, and we'll talk about it a little bit later as we go on here, but the movie portrays this really well. And just how successful you were, how much they liked you, how they were hoping that really you were going to go on and do great things for Planned Parenthood. But something changed your whole trajectory with this organization. It really changed your whole entire life. You were invited in. I don't know I don't want to, say the story because I don't know it as well as you do, but you were invited in to watch and assist with the
Mhm.
abortion.
Yeah, it was an ultrasound guided abortion. Ultrasounds are not typically used during an abortion procedure. So we use them to date the pregnancy so that we knew how much to charge her for the abortion. But then the ultrasound is rolled away and it's not used during the actual abortion procedure. But this visiting physician, this visiting abortionist, um, did use them in his own private practice. So he wanted to show us what this type of abortion procedure looked like. And so in order to do that, though, he needed an extra pair of hands to actually
Okay.
hold the ultrasound probe in place during
Hmm.
the abortion. And so I was called in to be that set of hands. And so we did the ultrasound. The baby was a little over 13 weeks in gestation. By that time, the baby is completely formed,
Uh,
arms, legs, fingers, toes, eyes, everything. Heart's been
mhm.
beating since 3 weeks. post-conception. Every internal organ that we have in our bodies is completely formed on a preborn child by 13 weeks. Baby just needs more time to grow. So I was, standing there looking at the screen, feeling very nervous, not knowing what I was about to see on this ultrasound. And
is that the first time for you that you thought it was a baby? Was that realization something that you had at this moment at the clinic, or is this still something you were not accepting?
It's interesting because I'd pieced baby parts back together in the POC lab. That's part of working in the clinic. It wasn't really, for me, it was recognizing that I'm about to see this child die in real time. So, people are like, how could you look at these body parts and not recognize that this was a child? Well, it was just death. It was just parts. It was just, I don't know. I don't really know how I reconciled that in my head, but it just was sort of medical, it was like, okay, well, it's just parts. It's just something that we have to do. It's just part of the procedure. I didn't see the death of that child. I didn't watch its heart beating and then stop. It was just sort of the aftermath of the abortion. Right.
Okay. And sometimes when you are submerged in something, you don't see the truth. You only see what you're being told. Or what you think.
Sin really can blind you.
Sure it does.
Right. And that it's really what happened to me. So, but when I'm looking at this baby on the screen, I'm seeing it sort of like wiggle around and I'm seeing this heart beating and I'm like, okay, like what am I about to see here? Like what's about to happen here? And I see the suction tube go into, I can see it going closer and closer to the baby. And when it touches him, the baby begins to jump and it's moving away and you can see it trying to recoil and trying to move away from that suction instrument. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this baby is having the exact same reaction that any of us would have if someone was threatening our life, right? We would be trying to actively move away from that threat. But in this case, there's nowhere for that baby to go.
No.
This is its safe haven, right? This is this baby's safe haven, and we are intruding. And
so you watched this
the most
abortion happen.
Horrific thing I've ever seen. And I saw this baby's heart stop beating. I saw this baby become dismembered in his mother's womb. And I knew then that, what I had witnessed, it was not choice. It was not any form of justice, like we called it, reproductive justice. It wasn't that. Certainly was not healthcare. What I had witnessed was the intentional killing of an innocent human being. And, there's a word for that, and that's murder. And I knew that that's what I had witnessed. And it was like, in the Bible, it talks about the veil being lifted.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
It
was really, all pulled back,
wasn't really what happened.
Wow. So now after this happens, you stay through the abortion, you go, I remember in the movie you were crying. You were just devastated. Was that the day you walked out and never walked back in?
No. I actually was there for a week after. I really didn't know what to do. I thought I was sort of naive. Actually, in the first few days, I thought I can change Planned Parenthood. I thought I'm going to get them to stop doing abortions. That was actually what I thought, because I think I'm influential enough at Planned Parenthood that I can get them to change. And then I soon realized after a couple of days, okay, that's not going to happen.
Right.
And so then I thought, okay, I'm not going to have anything to do with abortions, but I have to find another job. I can't just leave. I was making a ton of money. My husband was a public school teacher. So I thought we're going to be broke if I don't have another job and I just leave.
I think
you're
trying to gather your thoughts together. You're trying to make an
so I
escape
thought
plan.
I have to figure something out before I leave. I can't just jump, without having this safety net. And so a week had gone by. I felt sick. I felt like I wanted to vomit every time I went into work. I just hated it. I knew I was participating in like something evil, and, but I was like, but I'm not doing the abortions. I'm not having anything to do with the abortions. I've separated myself from it. And then one day I went into work. I was standing there in my office. I was looking out the window and I saw this woman walking outside. She walked out the door and she was holding this little brown paper bag. And I knew inside of that paper bag were the pills for medication abortion. And I just thought, I'm still doing it. Like, even if I'm not in the room, even if I'm not counseling her, I'm still here. Because everything about Planned Parenthood is abortion. My paycheck is still coming from abortion. My 401k is still being funded by abortion. Like, everything is about abortion here. And I was like, if the Bible says, do not compromise with evil, flee from it. And I thought, you know what? I was like, Lord, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. We may have to be homeless. I don't know what's going to happen, but I was like, I cannot be here another day. And I was so thankful that I did have that faith foundation growing up, because even though I had strayed from the Lord, even though I had definitely become of the world while I was at the clinic, I was so glad that my parents had instilled that foundation of faith in me, because I knew that the Lord was not going to let me fall.
Right.
And I knew that if I took that step of faith, he would catch me. And so that's when I was like, I've got to get out of here. And that's when I left.
So that was it. You say you crossed the lifeline. So I love that. Now you go on. I can't imagine how difficult it was. I can't imagine the backlash, the pressure, tough decisions, for sure. But God has opened up so many doors for you. How did the movie come about?
Yeah.
Who said to you, Abby, let's listen, you're getting out there, you're sharing your testimony, and now all of a sudden you've got this movie in the plans, and it was a huge success. I know people that are pro-choice that went to see it because of who you were and what you've done. And it opened up the door for a lot of churches and discussions for families, for kids. It's a tough discussion, but the movie gave us a platform. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd written Unplanned. That became a national bestseller. I wrote that in 2011. It came out January 11, 2011. It was a huge success, much to my surprise, because I thought the only people that are going to read it were like my family. That became a big success. And then I wrote my second book. That came out in 2015, The Walls Are Talking, and that was successful too. And so I started my ministry, and then there were none in 2012, helping to get abortion clinic workers out of the industry. And so I was just kind of doing my thing, and then one day I got an email from these two guys, and they asked me if I was interested in turning my book, Unplanned, into a major motion picture. And I emailed them back and said, no.
You did say no.
I was like, I'm really not. And they said, well, we're the guys that did God's Not Dead.
Oh.
And I was like, again.
You were still no?
No, I was like, I honestly thought that movie was super cheesy, and I'm not interested in you cheesing up my life.
Oh, no.
So I was like, no.
Two no's. Was there a third no too?
Yeah. And so they were like, will you just let us come to Austin, where I live, and will you just let us come and talk to you? And I was like, okay, but I mean, it's still going to be a no. So they came and they talked to me, and I just felt like I had been vulnerable enough.
Right.
And I thought,
you would really be putting it all out there.
Yeah. Like seeing your life up on a big screen, I was like, not interested. And so they came, and I was still like, just, And I said, well, I'll think about it. And so they left, and my husband was like, have you even prayed about this? Or are you just like throwing up the no without even praying about it? And I was just like, shut up, And I
That whole
knew like,
prayer thing, asking
yeah,
God
and
what I'm supposed to do. Come
I
on.
knew that this is something that God wanted me to do. I just was so hesitant to
Yeah.
do it. And
I mean,
so,
even reliving it again and again and again, it's got to be difficult.
yeah, but I thought, ooh, like my abortion up on a screen,
Right.
like I just was like, oh my gosh, like my grandma's gonna see this, you know?
Right.
So, but I finally
So
was like, okay, I'll do it.
look at
And,
that.
it was a good process. It was difficult, but it was good. And in the end, though, it really didn't matter what I thought. I mean, in the end, it was really about converting people to Christ, converting people to the pro-life movement. It was
That's
about
right.
saving lives. It was about saving eternal lives. Like that's what it was about. And in the end, that's exactly what it did.
Hmm.
And it really wasn't about Abby Johnson at all. It could have been about Alice Smith, right? I mean, like
Right.
it didn't matter. It wasn't about me. It was really about glorifying the Lord. And
That's
that's what
right.
I think we did.
Beautiful. Well, moms, if you have not seen Unplanned, I think I assume that everyone has seen it, but there's some new moms that are joining us, Abby. So if you have not seen Unplanned and you have not heard or seen this story, read her books, it's definitely a must see. Then you go on, like you said, you've got a couple ministries that you're working through, let alone being the mama of 8. You've got the podcast, international speaker. I mean, God has just opened up some beautiful doors for you because you said yes. And that's why I want to just pause here for a minute, because a lot of times we just have to say yes. We've got a tough situation, incredible circumstances, but if we can say yes to what God is doing in our lives, He will bring healing and He will bring opportunity for His glory. And that's what's happened with your life. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
What about the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade? Now, I'd love to just get talk about a couple of points here that are happening in the culture. What will happen now with the pro-life movement with our country? It's going to go to the states. What do you see happening? I know you're speaking all across the country on life and legislation. What are your thoughts? What are we going to see now in the pro-life movement?
Well, I mean, we've actually, we've sort of made our fight a little more difficult because we've taken it from, one federal battle to now, 51 individual
States,
battles if we,
right?
if we count DC, which I wish we didn't have to, but we do. So we've got now, 51 individual battles. I think honestly that the most difficult thing that we're dealing with, and this is something that I think everybody needs to really hear what I'm saying, is, we had we really had a test, and that test case was Kansas.
Right.
Kansas had a ballot initiative, and this was the first test case after Roe, right? So they had this ballot initiative, and Kansas is a pro-life state. They are a red state. They are a conservative state. In no way, shape, or form is Kansas a pro-choice,
Right.
pro-abortion state.
They're
Okay,
not a liberal state.
they had this ballot initiative to outlaw abortion to make abortion illegal in Kansas. They had, good marketing. They had a good campaign. They had good boots on the ground. They had door-to-door campaigns doing all this stuff. By all belief, everybody thought this was going to pass. And this was the first opportunity that a state had to really sort of flex what Roe means, right? That the states have the opportunity to legislate how they want now that Roe has been overturned.
Right.
And they failed. The pro-life movement failed by a landslide. And it didn't make sense. People were like, this doesn't make sense. What's going on?
The problem
It
is
didn't happen. It failed because people didn't show up and vote.
Yes.
That is going to be a consistent problem across this country. It is a consistent problem because only about half of Christians, church-going Christians, are registered to vote.
Right.
And so when you have only half of Christians, people who probably would be voting the right way,
they don't show up,
registered to vote.
right?
It's really pathetic. because you've got you've got these Democrats out here, you've got liberals, pro-aborts, people who are trying to break down traditional marriage. You've got these people out here who are really working for evil.
Right.
They're out here renting 12 passenger vans, 15 passenger vans. They're busing people in, okay? Going, door to door, busing people in to vote for a Democratic vote. And we can't even get people in the pews of our church to register to vote, much less go to their local poll to vote. It's so pathetic, because what that means is that these people who are working for evil have a greater urgency,
a greater passion
to do
Crazy.
evil,
right,
than we have to do God's work.
Right.
And that is so ridiculous. It is so pathetic. And it should be shocking. It should be shocking enough that we are on our social media, that we are making phone calls, that we are doing everything we can to encourage our friends and our family members, that we are up their noses to make sure that they are out there voting. I just voted today. I have my little sticker. I early voted. I went out and did my part. And on our staff call today, and then there were none, I was like, have you voted already? Who has voted? Raise your hand if you're voted. Raise your hand if you're planning on voting today. And these are my employees. I know they're going to go vote, but I am going to make sure that they are going to go out and vote, because I know they're all going to vote for life. I know they're all going to vote in a righteous way. And I want to make sure that their vote is counted. Yeah. And that is what we all need to be doing. We need to be holding people accountable, particularly those who are in our families, in our church communities, in our friend circles. We need to make sure that people are going out there and they're voting. This is something we cannot be lazy about.
Moms, we can no longer be spectators. We can no longer have this idea that we don't think our vote matters. Our vote matters. Our vote is our voice, and we've got to be out. We have a whole mom vote section on our webpage called Mom Vote, where you can register. You find out what polling places, the platforms, the voter guides. I mean, moms, we have to be engaged in our culture. We have got to be engaged in our culture. Like Abby's saying too, if you're voting, yes and amen, but you've got to make sure that your neighbor, your friends, your daughters, your community, your church, that they're voting. So I'm saying yes and amen, Abby, because we can't lose this fight. We've got to take this state by state. We've got to protect the unborn.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, be the annoying person. Like, be the annoying friend.
Be the annoying friend.
There's too much on the line for us to worry about making somebody annoyed or offending someone or whatever. Because let me tell you something. The left, they are not worried about offending you at all.
Right.
So why are we so worried about offending everybody else? This is our culture on the line. These are our children on the line. This is morality of our society on the line. So be that bee in everybody's bonnet, right? Be that squeaky wheel. Make sure people are doing their civic duty. Make sure they're voting. Make sure that you are on your everybody's got social media. Make sure you are on your social media platforms. Make sure that you are speaking out on the issues that matter.
And educate your group. If your group is still trying to figure out what is abortion, what is happening with abortion, you've got Abby's books, you've got the movies. I mean, there are so many avenues right now where we can speak to life and the truth about life. So be the resource, share the truth. I'd like to ask you a quick other question before we let you go here. What advice do you have with moms about raising pro-life children? I think this is a whole cultural issue, right? We've got to be speaking about life to our children and our daughters. And when do you approach this subject with them? And when do we start discussing this? I remember when my kids heard about abortion, they were just mortified. They were like, you mean a mom's not going to have, they're not going to carry their child? I mean, they don't want them. Why couldn't they give them to somebody else? I mean, logically in their brain, they couldn't comprehend it. But what about raising pro-life kids and affecting this generation? I'd love to hear your words as we close here today.
So I think raising a pro-life generation and raising pro-life kids is something that starts very early in a home. Um, so we, and I think it really starts helping your children understand what is taking place with a baby in the womb at a very young age.
Yeah.
So I don't have any right here with me, but those little fetal models that are like 12 weeks, we always have those around our house. My kids see those from a very young age. Little kids love those. They see them, they love them. They're little teeny tiny babies. You can order them, you can get them. We always have those around our house. My kids know that that's a little baby at 12 weeks in a mommy's tummy. I mean, my 3-year-old could look at that and go, baby. They know that that's a baby, right? They've seen me pregnant for many, many years. When they see a woman that's pregnant, I'm like, what's in that mommy's tummy? And they're like, it's a baby. We have taught our children fetal development from a very young age. We have taught them that a baby's heart begins to beat at 3 weeks. We've taught them that babies have fingerprints. We've taught them all of these different things.
You've made those babies real.
That's right. And so we've taught them that their brain starts working at 8 weeks. Like we've taught them all of these things, right? And so we have really, we've made that baby a person to them, right? Because that baby is a person.
Right.
And so we've also taken our children out. I take my children out to local abortion clinics to pray.
You're making them little activists already.
Yeah, I mean, very young. They go to pro-life rallies with us. And they'll say, why are we here? What are we doing? Well, when they're little, I just say, we're praying for babies in their mommy's tummies, right? That's all we say. And then, they may ask, Mom, what is an abortion? And so, I'll say, well, depending on how old they are, they may ask that when they're like 4 or 5 years old. And I'll say, well, it's when, like my 5-year-old just recently asked this, and I'll say, well, it's when a mommy doesn't want her baby and she goes to a doctor and a doctor takes the baby out of her tummy and the baby doesn't live anymore. And, they're like, huh, okay. Like, they don't really, they're like, why, and I'm like, well,
they don't, they can't comprehend
they don't get it. It doesn't make sense to them. But as they get a little older, I start getting more descriptive. And the one thing I can say to parents, don't worry about being too descriptive with your kids. That was something that I worried about with my oldest daughter, Grace. When I took her to the March for Life, when the first year we ever went, she was 3. She was about 3.5. We walked by an image of, it was a graphic image. And if I ever had to pick out a graphic image that was my favorite, it would be this one. It's a 24-week abortion, and it's a baby that's been torn apart, but they put it back together. And then it's a 24-week baby in the NICU, and it's hooked up to a bunch of tubes. And the one that's aborted, underneath it, it says unwanted. And the one in the NICU says wanted. And we were walking by this, and I was thinking, I had all these thoughts in my head, and I thought, okay, do I try to shield her from this? Do I try to keep her from looking at it? Whatever, 'cause she was young.
Right.
And I thought, no, I'm just gonna play it out, right? Whatever happens is gonna happen. We were walking by it, and she stopped and she looked at it, for maybe a good 30 seconds. She didn't say anything. She just kept walking. And then, I don't know, a few feet later, she turned around, she looked at me and she goes, Mommy, that baby was broken. And I said, yeah, Gracie, that baby was broken. And she didn't say anything, and she just kept walking. So about a week later, we were saying our prayers at night. And she said, Mommy, she said, I want to pray for all the babies. And I want to pray that babies don't get broken.
Oh, how beautiful.
And I said, okay. So then she and I were going out to the clinics and praying regularly. And so then probably a year later, she had heard me talking about abortion. She finally said she asked me what abortion was. And I said, remember when you saw that picture? I said, I don't know if you remember this. It was like a year ago. You saw that picture and baby was broken. She said, yeah. I said, well, that's abortion. I said, it breaks babies. And she was mad. She was like, why would a mommy do that to her baby? She was angry.
Right.
And you know what? Moms that are listening, I let her sit with that anger because it should make us angry.
Right.
And I let her sit with it. And I let her be mad because it should make all of us infuriated that this is happening. I didn't try to make excuses for why women do this, or because there really is no excuse. So probably 3 years went by or something, and she had heard my story a little bit, and I guess by that time she had heard that her mom had had 2 abortions. She had never asked me a question about it or anything like that. We were in my car. She was probably about 7 or 8 years old. She was in the back of our van. And we were not talking about abortion or anything. She said, Mom, she said, you know how you've had 2 abortions? And I said, yeah. I said, I have. She goes, I've been thinking about it. And she said, I think that those babies are in heaven. And she said, I think that when you get to heaven, you're going to see them and you're going to get to hold them.
Oh, how sweet.
And so I guess what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to have these conversations with your kids.
Right.
Your kids can handle it. They can take it. They can process a whole lot more than you think they can.
Sure.
I think that God gives them a very unique ability as children to process these hard topics. They have this childlike faith. And I think that they see things in the way that we should see them, as very black and white.
Yeah.
And I think that God helps them process those things in black and white. And I think it's a lot easier for them than we realize.
And really,
And
the world is sharing this message with them at a very young age.
That's right. And
So
if we don't share it with them, if we don't share this with our kids at a very young age, and I'm talking about anything, I'm talking about homosexuality, I'm talking about the transgender thing, anything. I mean, my boys, my 7-year-old, we were in the store one day and there were these 2 guys and they kissed in line at the grocery store. And my 7-year-old looked at me, he was just like, what in the world, We went home and I said, we're going to talk about this.
Right.
And I thought, my 7-year-old is not too young to hear that that is an abomination to the Lord. And he is not too young to hear about what the Lord says about homosexuality. And so we sat down and we talked about it. And he walked away with an understanding about marriage and what the Lord says about having a holy family, and that's not it. Right. And we have got to not be scared to talk to our children about these foundational Christian issues. And because if we don't, the world will.
Yeah.
And they will talk to them at a very, very young age. So don't think I've got to protect my kids and I've got to shelter my kids from this, because listen, mamas, the world is not going to shelter your kids.
Right. You're
so you need to talk to them from a Christian perspective. The Lord will protect them.
Right.
But the world will not. And so you've got to talk to them about these very core tenets of our faith.
Yeah. The world is stripping our kids of their innocence, of their faith, of even their relationships with their parents. I mean, we all know, we've talked a lot about this in different podcasts, but it is crude. It is horrendous what they're doing in the schools and in the culture. So just like Abby said, I mean, we've got to be the ones that are teaching in our home, at our kitchen table. We're the ones that have to be raising our kids with the principles, the biblical principles and the biblical truths, and, teach them, train them up in the way that they should go. So thank you, Abby.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you to your tribe over there and to your husband and your family for letting you travel around the country and share the good news about life and hope. I just love what you're doing. You're one of those warrior mamas. How can people find out about your podcast and your ministries? Is that on your website? Is that abbyj.com?
Yeah, abbyj.com, my new book, Fierce Mercy. They can get that there. They can listen to my podcast, Politely Rude, anywhere, but it's also linked there on my website. They can contact me. My contact link is there. So anything they want to know about me is on my website, abbyj.com.
And what I love about it is we want to share your testimony with all the moms in our circle so they can hear what God has done. And there's nothing like hearing from someone that has lived it, experienced it, and been transformed. I always just think that's so powerful because, I can talk about something that I don't have any background in, but when you have someone that has been in the industry, working for Planned Parenthood, saw an abortion and left because of what the divine revelation provided to her. And look what God has done. I just love it, Abby. So thank you so much. Thank you to your team over there too, and all those moms that are helping you fight for life. We're there in the trenches with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's going to take all of us. So all
It
of us
is.
working together.
All right. God bless you. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye. What an incredible story. I love Abby. I love her boldness. I love that she's proclaiming the truth and speaking about life and abortion. So that is truly amazing. One of the things I did want to mention, she briefly mentioned it, but I want to get it a little clearer here for you, is she has a ministry called Pro Love Ministries that is a 24-hour crisis helpline for moms, single moms, anyone in a crisis. It's loveline.com, and their phone number is 1-888-550-1588. Again, that is Pro Love Ministries by Abby Johnson, a place where moms can go if they need help in a crisis. So write that down and share that as well. Okay. All right. Here at the end, I just want to remind everyone to please stop by and visit our website at momsforamerica.us. Again, check out all of our amazing resources, events, and programs. We have an amazing lineup of information for you moms, everything that's happening in our culture, how to run for school board, how to teach the principles of liberty to your home, just everything you can imagine. I'd love for you also to check out our signature program, which is called the Cottage Meetings. That's 12 lessons that will inspire and educate. They'll help you educate you and your family about America's amazing heritage. Then you can share those principles of liberty in your home and in your community. It's amazing. All righty. That program, along with everything else, is on our website. We say from parental rights to public policy, Moms for America has it all, and we surely do. We also want to invite you, when you do go to our website there, momsforamerica.us, sign up for our weekly newsletter. That's how we communicate with you every week. We will help you be educated on issues that relate to you as a mom, get a chance to engage with moms all around the country. So please sign up for our newsletter. We say this every week, moms. We believe that liberty begins at home and that moms are truly, truly the heartbeat of America. That's why this movement is so, so powerful. It's the moms like you and I uniting all across the country to save our kids and to save our future. Again, please like and subscribe, share today's podcast. Abby is such a powerful story. Share this with your friends. I believe it is a life changer. It is a world-changing message that she will share. And I believe moms in our circle will really be touched by it. Please join us next week as we have another inspiring and informative discussion with moms just like you. Thanks for joining us. Let's keep changing our world one home at a time. And I will talk to you next week. God bless.